know, don't worry if you've met me before. This presentation won't be exactly like what you've done before. I have a couple of new things in there. But yeah, very excited to be talking to you all. I'm curious if you can just put in the chat what university you're joining from, just so I have an idea of who's all in the room. Okay, well, it's great to meet you all. Nice to be joining you from across the province and actually the country. I'm coming in from Rossland, BC. I'm living here on a ski hill for the winter. So we have a lot of different time zones in the room and different cities and different experiences, which is just totally great for innovation, to have all those different perspectives. So the presentation I'm going to be giving you today and the workshop will actually be breaking out and doing some of this stuff and practicing it, instead of just getting lectured the whole time, so you have that to look forward to. It's focused on ideation, but it actually takes you one step before ideation, because the brainstorming piece is sometimes the easy part. The hard part is coming up with inspiration for that ideation. A, coming up with the inspiration, and B, actually coming up with ideas that are impactful and are going to make a difference in the world, make money if you're looking at a for-profit idea. That part is actually the hard part. So what we're going to be doing today is really focused on how do you discover problems in order to fuel that ideation. Because if you do a really good job of problem discovery, the ideation part is the easy part. So today is really all about before you start building. As builders and technical students, it's likely very tempting for you to start building or modeling your solution right away. You probably had like an initial idea and you were like, okay, let's go off to the races. We want the most time to build the most functional and beautiful code, all of this stuff. You want the most time to build that perfect thing. And I'm here today to bust that belief and actually hold you back a little bit so that you spend a little bit more time on the problem discovery and the ideation part before you write a single line of code or model a single experiment. I know that we have lots of different STEM folks here. So my goal in this workshop is to prove that you need to engage in a problem discovery process before you do anything else. And also, I'm here to prove to you that that first idea that popped into your head probably sucks. It probably sucks a lot. and that's okay, because it's the first step to come up with a good idea. And we're going to work through some tools in order to help you come up with something that sucks less in the next couple weeks before you start building. So here's the agenda for today. So we have about an hour and 20 minutes. We're going to go through kind of 3 big topics and have some time to break out in between. The first is a conversation about finding problems worth solving. So there's lots of problems in the world. There's a lot of problems that are not worth solving. They're just a minor inconvenience. Nobody's willing to pay for it. It doesn't really make anybody's lives that much better. But how do you find those problems that are actually worth solving? The second is once you think you've found one of those problems worth solving, how do you actually validate that you aren't just in fairy tale land and that's actually a problem? And we're going to give you some tools to actually go out and talk to people and validate that that problem you've identified is actually a real thing. It's actually a problem. And then the third is the lean startup method, which is essentially kind of a short description of that. Is now that you have all this information and you have this problem that you think is worth solving, what do you do with it? How do you organize that information and actually make decisions based on it? So those are the kind of topics that we're going to be covering, and there's some tools that we'll get into that you'll be able to use to actually move you forward in this. So to start, we're going to be talking about problems worth solving. So you're starting this hackathon with a really large problem, whether you're choosing the stream of COVID-related challenges or issues surrounding diversity in STEM. That is a huge topic, like a macro topic right at the top here. And while I believe that you are all smart and intelligent and the top of your class and the motivative, there is no way that you are going to solve this whole thing. with the problem or the solution that you come up with in this hackathon. And this isn't Emily said it was impossible and I'm going to prove her wrong kind of impossible. This is just actually impossible. Because these problems, challenges around COVID, issues with diversity are systemic. They are part of a huge system that allows that problem to stay stuck and to not be fixed. Because if it wasn't part of a system, somebody would have fixed it already. We would have already just said, oh, there's the issue, let's fix it right away. As a society, it would have been easy. So today what we're going to be talking about a little bit is a lens of systems thinking. I'm curious who has been introduced or used systems thinking before. Either like a comment or a wave will do. Anyone that's used it? Lots of no's. One person a little bit. Joel waved a little bit. I'm going to pick on you, Joel, because I know you. Okay, so that's awesome. That's really exciting for me because systems thinking is one of the things that I am most jazzed about, and I learned about in my probably 4th year of university, and it completely changed my path. So I'm super excited to share it with you guys today. So systems thinking is essentially a framework of seeing the interrelatedness of things rather than just a thing. It's about seeing patterns and how to change those patterns versus just snapshots of data stuck in time. And it's really important, especially in today's day and age, because we're living in a time where there's so much complexity with globalization and a global pandemic. You can't find just the root of something. It's this whole integrated system that's all playing on each other. So you really need a different lens. You can't just look at cause and effect. It's more like, how does this whole system work together? We also have a tendency as problem solvers to see a problem through our lens. So we see our perspective of something, and we believe that that's the most crucial part of the issue. So if I care about the environment and in my daily life, I see that lots of people aren't recycling. I think that if we just had a recycling program, that would solve this problem. But I'm seeing just this narrow lens. So systems thinking allows you to take a step back and see what's going on in the whole system. That, okay, is this program actually the best thing to do? Or maybe there's something over here. So this is really about picking a micro problem, so something that you can bite off and actually make a difference on, versus picking something so big and messy that you'll never kind of get anywhere. And part of that is selfish for you guys, because you as an innovator, as a builder, you want to see success and you want to see those kind of little wins along the way. And if you pick something, you pick a problem that's just so messy and so big, it's really easy to get discouraged because you won't be able to see that change quick enough. Maybe it will take your whole career or a couple of lifetimes to get anywhere. So by picking something that's one leverage point within that system, it's also kind of selfish because it gives you that win a little bit sooner. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing in this next workshop piece. We're going to be diving into it right away, is an opportunity for you to actually identify your unique perspective and a leverage point that might actually be a really good place to go. So I'm going to introduce you to a tool that's called the Impact Gap Canvas. This canvas was designed at Oxford University by a woman named Daniela Pepe-Thornton. And she wrote and did a ton of research on the concept of heropreneurship. So what she identified was that there was a lot of university programs to help students start social enterprises. So businesses that had a social good, but not a lot of programs to actually show students how they existed within that system that they were trying to change and identify if maybe there was a better way to solve or make a difference than maybe a social enterprise. So it's a really interesting tool that really is a tool of research. So it's a tool to guide some introduction research to a problem that focuses on 3 main areas. So you'll see the kind of top of the canvas here. The first is mapping the challenge. So what is actually going on? Who's affected? Who are the players? What are the impacts? Who gets hurt? all of those things. What's actually happening? Then the second is solutions mapping. So on the other side of that bridge there, what has already been done? What's already been tried? Is there another country that has tried something that worked? What has been tried and failed? Really doing that kind of glance to see who else is trying to solve this problem. Because something like diversity in STEM or the global pandemic isn't just being brushed aside. There's lots of people busy trying to get things done. And they are probably doing some really cool things. And it would be silly to go into problem solving without looking to see what others have done so far. So those are kind of the two main points. And then what's really cool is that brings you to the gaps. So you can start to see, okay, well, here's what the problem is. Here's all the stuff that's being done. The problem still exists. So why is that? What is the gaps in the middle keeping this problem being perpetuated over time? For something like COVID, the timeline is a little bit shorter, so maybe the solutions are a little bit less built out. But the conversation of diversity in STEM is not a new one. That conversation has been going on for decades, especially the last decade. So why are we still having this conversation? Let's focus on the gaps there instead of trying to reinvent something that somebody has already tried. So these slides will be sent to you, and there'll be an opportunity to click and learn more about the Impact Gap Canvas, and also to download your own copy. But we're actually going to be jumping into an activity where you will get the chance to start to actually think out the Impact Gap Canvas and start to put some ideas down. So you're going to have about 20 minutes to start adding thoughts to your Impact Gap Canvas in your team. So I'm going to share two links. There's two Jamboards. One is for teams 1 to 10, and one is from teams 11 to 23. The Jamboard just wouldn't make me enough pages, so I had to make two. So you're going to jump into there. If you guys aren't familiar with Jamboard, it's the same as like a Google Doc. It's live. So while we aren't going to be doing breakout rooms from the meeting, just because there's so many of you and it's quite cumbersome to coordinate, you'll be able to work with your teams right in that Jamboard. And if it would be valuable to you and easy to do, you could make a little meeting quickly and jump into that, but it's not necessary. You can kind of just do this alone and just be adding sticky notes. So the first Jamboard is teams 1 to 10. You'll be able to scroll through there and find your sticky note. And then the other one is teams 11 to 23. So you'll find a page that's labeled with your team number. So you can just grab a sticky note and start adding some thoughts to the Impact Gap Canvas. So right now, because you guys are right in the beginning of this sprint, there's kind of going to be two categories of the thoughts you put down. There's going to be things you know based on your life experience and the research you've done so far. And there's also going to be questions. So things that you don't know the answer to, but you're like, I definitely want to know more about that. So you're going to put both of those things down on this Jamboard, and then this can be a starting off point for your research over the weekend or the next couple days or the next week, depending on kind of your timeline. So I want to give just a little bit of space for questions. Does everybody understand how the next 20 minutes will go? And yeah, if you're curious about which team you're on, you're not sure, Yasmin has posted a link here that has all the team numbers and your names beside them. So you can click into there and find which team you're on. And if you're here without your team, thanks, good question, Andrew. You can just work in the document by yourself. That's totally fine. So this will stay active for you. So you can, I won't delete this. This will be your Jamboard for the rest of the hackathon. So what we can do is you can share that with your team so that they can see what you've worked on, or you can transfer it to an external version of the Impact Gap Canvas and you guys can all work on it together. But it's just kind of a starting out point. So, right, if you're all by yourself, then it just means that you have some focused 20 minutes to work on the project. By yourself. But if not, then you'll see kind of random sticky notes appearing and you'll know that your team is here. One of the questions that I like to ask the most, especially when we're talking about social change and something systemic, is who stands to benefit from nothing changing, from the status quo? That's a really impactful one, especially from the topic of diversity in STEM, thinking about who benefits from this staying the same. Okay, I would love to hear some thoughts about the tool and if you had any insights as you were starting to put stickies down. You can type in the chat box or yell it out. Had you guys thought about this in this way up until now? About kind of looking at this problem from a systems lens at all? Maybe you weren't using that language, but was this new?
Personally, I'm finding the two main themes, like you said, they're very macro, and it's the trickiest part has been trying to distill that down into a problem that is small enough for 3 people to tackle, but we're still worthwhile tackling. That's where I'm
Totally. Yeah, that balance between something interesting and doable.
Yes.
Totally. Thanks for sharing. Aria says that no, this was new for me. I really like it. It's a different approach, but a great one. Thanks for sharing, guys. Yeah, so the reason that I like this tool is that it allows you, by no means are you going to, in a week, map this whole system and understand the whole thing. But by doing the exercise, you'll start to see some trends emerge within your team in that gap section. Because the places you do research on and the articles you read will ultimately be things that interest you. And that interest and that personal connection is really important because that's kind of what fuels you to move forward. So especially if you're feeling a little bit lost in the complexity, this is a really great starting point for your team. So I would say what we've done in the past is we've gotten students on teams to go out and do this separately. So you would each go and spend a couple hours building out your impact gap canvas and then come together and share it and see in that gap section, was there anything that popped up for all 3 of you? Is there anywhere that all 3 of you really were like, yeah, this is a big problem? And that can be an interesting tool to start to narrow down and say, okay, what are we going to focus on? Just based on that kind of interest in where your research goes. So like I said, this tool will be available to you. I'm going to have these links open. The links will be in the slides as well, so you can find them and find your Jamboard. You can also, if you click the little 3 dots on the Jamboard at the top, you can say save frame as an image. So if you want to make sure that what you wrote down doesn't get lost, that's a good way to do that as well. But like I said, I won't go in there and delete everything, but everything's open to all of you. So if you want to save it and make sure it's safe, that would be a good way to do it. Yeah, also really recommend watching the video of Daniela Pappy-Thornton explaining the Impact Gap Canvas. She obviously is the one that built it, so her passion for this work is really contagious. And that link will be provided to you guys as well, and to those who aren't here today. So the next thing that I want to dive into is something called customer discovery. So this is kind of a second way to start to discover what problems are present in this space. And there's kind of 2 ways that you can use it. One is just straight up figuring out like what's on people's minds. Let's get out of the office and actually just talk to some people and figure out what is their perspective on this issue. Because your perspective, other students' perspective, your professor's perspective, your parents' perspective is just one of a million different perspectives on this issue, especially these 2 that just affect so many people in so many different ways. So customer discovery is also a really good way to get out there and figure out what else is going on and what's most important to people. And is what's most important to you most important to other people as well? So The reason that we do customer discovery, and this is something that we actually do throughout the whole life cycle, from before you have an idea, once you have an idea, when you've built something, when you've launched it, the whole process is really important to continuously be talking to your customer. And when I say customer, that could also be the user. It could also be the beneficiary. So it might not actually be someone that's exchanging money for your product. Customer is just kind of the person that benefits from this product being out there. You might have two different customers if you're building a multi-sided platform, like for example, trying to think of one, there's so many, like Kijiji, there's two people, there's the buyer, there's the seller, and they both have completely different reasons that they're coming to Kijiji. So you need to understand both of them. So there's lots of different people that you should be kind of discovering with. The reason that we do it throughout the whole life cycle is because whenever you have an idea, you have a lot of assumptions built into that idea based on your unique perspective of the world. And those assumptions fall into three different categories. One is about the problem. So, and this is, we're talking about kind of the micro problem. So we don't have to question whether diversity in STEM is a problem. Boom, check, it's a problem. But underneath that of, let's say you're trying to build a platform that connects mentors to high school students. And the problem is that otherwise they can't find those mentors. Is that actually a problem? Like, are people actually having trouble finding mentors? I'm not sure. There might be a problem there, or there might not be. You have to go out and validate that that's really a problem, and it's top of mind for people. Second, once you've validated, yep, this is a problem, people are talking about it, people are challenged with it, the second types of assumption you have is that your solution is the right type of solution. So if your idea for the mentorship problem was to create a marketplace where people can be matched, you're assuming that that would be better than having an in-person meetup where people can network and have speed dating. So that's an assumption as well, that your solution is the right one. And then finally, you have assumptions that you can actually build this thing and you can actually make it successful. Where our minds usually go when we're coming up with an idea, especially if we are technically minded people who are getting taught how to build things, you will probably worry first about executing it. That kind of feels like the scariest thing. Is like, can I learn Java? Can I do the right science experiment without it blowing up? Like, those are the things you're going to be the most worried about. And those are actually the easiest things to figure out. I'm saying this as a non-technical person, so I'm not undermining how hard what you guys do is, because it's really challenging, but you can figure it out. There's a guidebook. There's someone to talk to. There's someone to troubleshoot with. If the problem actually exists or not, or if this solution is the right one, is a much riskier assumption, because there's no clear-cut answer. Yes, this is how you do it. There's no textbook that you can learn how to write this specific code or how to do this specific experiment. So this is kind of part of my ploy to you to focus a little bit more on the problem and what the solution is before you dived really deep into the building. So customer discovery is a way to validate those assumptions, because you're going out and you're having real conversations with people. So I'm going to show you a couple of videos just because these folks explain this stuff so well. I'm going to hope that the sound works. And if not, we'll probably just roll with it. But customer discovery and going out to talk to people is super intimidating, first of all. We were all told from the time that we were very young not to talk to strangers. And I'm telling you to go talk to some strangers. Obviously, it is a pandemic, so that talking to strangers will look a lot like reaching out to people online, sending emails, having kind of online conversations, which has its own challenges, but nonetheless, I'm asking you to talk to strangers. But the way that you do it, we're going to go through it a little bit here and give you some tips on how to do it, and show you why it's so valuable and what you can learn. And also what not to do, because this stuff is hard to do right. And I've done it wrong many times with my side hustles.
Welcome to the LIFT series on customer development. Okay. Today we're going to be talking about customer interviews, or specifically how to do a good customer interview and the rules around that. So customer development is all about validating your assumptions around your business. And the way you do that is by talking to your customers. There's a couple simple rules that we have that will help you make sure that you're getting good information from them. The first one, and the most important, is no pitching. The difference between sales and customer development is subtle, but basically at the end, you're not asking them for money. And so if they think that you're going to be asking them for money, they're not going to be giving you the information that you want. They're not going to open up to you. So if I say, hey, I'm building this dog shampoo that makes dogs not smell bad, would you want that? That sounds like you're selling to them. So they might say no, or they might say yes, but either way, like, they're probably just saying yes because they want to be nice to you. They may not actually need it. You haven't demonstrated anything. You haven't validated any of your assumptions. So no pitching while you're doing customer development during your customer interviews. The next rule is no ice cream questions. A great example of an ice cream question is, do you want ice cream? No rational human being would ever say no to that question. Everyone wants ice cream all of the time. So by asking, do you want ice cream, you're not getting anything useful out of them. So back to the dog example, does your dog smell bad sometimes? Yeah, it does. Wouldn't it be great if your dog didn't smell bad sometimes? Yes. What rational person would want their dog to smell bad? So you're not learning anything from that. So why bother asking? Because it ends up making you feel like you've validated one of your assumptions when you really haven't. The next one is pull, don't push. So you want to pull information out of them. You don't want to push things onto them. So I might ask someone, do you have a dog? Yes. Cool. What do you dislike about having a dog? And they're like, oh, well, I mean, my dog isn't particularly well trained, so it misbehaves a lot. You're like, oh, interesting, interesting. And you dive into that a little bit. But you really want to see if they want this shampoo because the dog smells bad. So you're like, well, what else don't you like about having a dog? And they're like, oh, I mean, it really messes with my social life. Like, I have to come back every day after work and walk it and take it to the bathroom and clean up after it. And like, it's really obnoxious because I can't go out to the bar with my friends after work. And you're like, oh, interesting, interesting. Tell me about that, blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, well, what else don't you like about having a dog? And they're like, well, I mean, it sheds all the time, and I just have dog fur all over my house. And you're like, oh, interesting. They've gone through 3 questions. You've pulled 3 problems out of them, and none of them have been, my dog smells bad sometimes. So maybe that's important, right? Maybe that means that their dog smelling bad isn't one of their top 3 problems. So in that case, you learned that their dog sheds all over the place. So maybe you should think about pivoting your dog shampoo to something that makes dogs not shed anymore. Next one, N of 1 is not proof. So that means one person saying something shouldn't make you validate or invalidate anything. It shouldn't make you make any big decisions. If someone says something interesting and unexpected, you should go validate that and try to get 10 more people to come to the same conclusion independently. If you can't, that person was just crazy. If you can, then you've learned something really interesting. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Basically, if I say, I want to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym this year. It's my New Year's resolution. I'm going to go 3 times every week for the whole year. If you look back at the last 3 years, I've been to the gym once. Now, there's a chance that they'll change. There's a chance they'll go to the gym all the time. But what's much more likely is that they'll go to the gym once or twice that year, and then they'll just kind of stop going. So if you look back at what they have done, it's a great indication of what they will do. So another great example of this is asking someone about their diet. So let me bring my assistant up and let's see what this looks like. This is Cav. Cav, why don't you tell me about your diet?
I eat pretty healthy
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah? Any rules that you live by?
Yeah, I do kind of the paleo thing, mostly various kinds of low carb, honestly. I sort of play by whatever rules I feel like at the time, but I try to stay away from the bread and the pasta and stuff like that.
Great, great. So what we've learned is Cav eats really healthy, and he stays away from breads and pastas and a lot of like meats and vegetables, right, Cav?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I eat a lot of meats and vegetables, yeah.
Great. So we've asked Cav about essentially his ideal self, about how he sees himself and his kind of future behavior, how he plans to eat. So let's try a different question. Cav, tell me about the last meal you had.
I had a sandwich a couple minutes ago. It was a meatball sandwich. It was pretty good. There was a lot of bread there, though, definitely.
Yeah. And what about the meal before that?
I was running kind of late to a meeting, so I had a Starbucks breakfast sandwich.
And what was in the breakfast sandwich?
Some egg. There was a muffin, definitely. They had salads there, but I didn't really feel like having a salad for breakfast. I felt like that was a little weird.
Gotcha. Thanks, Kev. So what we discovered is, you can go now.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, do you want to?
What we discovered is if you ask Cav what his diet is, he'll talk about his ideal self, how he sees himself. It also is kind of like how he sees that he'll eat in the future. But instead, if you ask about his past self, you end up finding out what he actually did. You find out of his actual self. And it turns out Cav doesn't actually eat particularly healthy. He has a lot of breads. I bet he had pasta last night, or Mexican food, or like all sorts of other stuff, right? So asking about their past self is asking about their actual self. And that's a great predictor of what they will do in the future. And so the last one is, and you just noticed this with the previous question, stories are better than statements. So Cav, how do you eat? He's like, I eat healthy. I don't eat bread. Great, those are statements. Tell me about the last time you did this. That encourages them to tell a story. And from that story, not only do you learn a lot more, but it gives you a lot more jumping off questions. Like, how am I gonna follow up, I eat healthy? What does that mean? And we're like, cool, I eat X, Y, and Z. That's not very interesting. That's pretty boring. So instead, you get them to tell a story. And then you can riff off that story. You can ask much more deeper questions. And they just talk a lot more. So that is the Lift video series on the rules of customer interviews. Tune in next week for good techniques to get those stories.
Okay, so super good video. So you guys saw me laughing. I've probably seen this video like 100 times, and this guy still cracks me up. So I am a huge fan of this series. They do a really good job of explaining customer interviews in a really clear way and give some really good examples. I'm not going to do a couple more videos that I had in here, but I will share the full series with you guys. So if you do want to dive into it, definitely worth a watch. If you're stuck on time, my trick for watching videos when they're assigned to me is watching them at like 1.5 speed, because you can get the information way faster and you still get to watch all the great content. So I'm going to skip past this. So there's some really good tips on how to actually get interviews. There's some good tips on what to ask, how to get stories out of people. So if you're curious about doing more of this, I definitely recommend watching the series. The big one is no pitching. So it's easy for you guys right now because you probably don't have a solution yet. You're really just doing that discovery. But once you have a solution, it's going to be really tempting to say like, oh my God, I'm building this thing. Like, would you buy it? And the person is going to be like, oh, you're a student. You seem nice. I'm going to say yes, because they're being nice to you. So avoid doing that. Try to talk about what they've done in the past. So what we really recommend for most people is to do at least 10 customer interviews when we first meet them. The reason that we say 10 is because 10 is it's definitely not a full-on data set that you could use for an academic paper, but it's enough to start to see some trends, to see, okay, what things are coming up all the time, what things that I thought would come up aren't coming up, and start to kind of get a sense of what's really going on here and get some breadcrumbs that you'd like to dig in further. So that's what I would recommend to you guys. As a team, if you do 10, that's great. If each of you do 10, even better. So the point of these conversations that you would be doing right now is to start to get some nuggets for what you should focus on for that micro problem. Then once you come up with a solution to tackle that micro problem, you'd want to go out again and make sure that, okay, is this solution a good solution? And the reason that I'm kind of inspiring you to do all this pre-work is that at the final presentation in like end of February, I think it is, you could either have a fully baked solution that nobody cares about, or you could have a half-baked solution that you also present, here's all the data and conversations that I had to prove that this is the right thing. I'm only halfway through building it because I did all of this data collection and I'm sure that it's an awesome project. Which of those two presentations is most compelling? And so there might be somewhere in between based on what the hackathon is asking and what the different awards are. But what I've seen time and time again is that the person that stands up and says, here's the data, here's what I learned, here's who I talked to, is always more compelling than the person that has the shiny slides or the perfectly built out financial plan. So I wanted to get into just a little bit of practice, and this is also helpful for you guys. So what we're actually going to do is jump in and do some practice customer interviews. So have your topic in mind. So whether it's the COVID pandemic or diversity in STEM, you're going to be randomly matched with someone. And Yasmin, I'm kind of throwing this at you. So I hope that that's okay with the automatically assigned breakout rooms. So we're just going to do one-on-one. You're going to have, let's say, 8 minutes for the conversation. You'll do kind of 4 minutes for one person, 4 minutes for the other person. I'm seeing a lot of people saying they're not prepared for this. That's okay. You're getting out of your comfort zone. It's good. You're all in this together. So you're going to jump into these conversations. You're just going to practice. And this is your very first time doing this. Or for some of you, this is your second time doing this. It's okay that you're going to suck at it. It's totally fine. The other person is going to suck at it too. So it's just kind of practice. It's ripping off that Band-Aid. So the things you're going to practice are getting stories. The line that always works, like foolproof, is, when was the last time you had a consequence or a challenge because of the COVID pandemic? Every single one of us can answer that question super easily and go and tell a story for about 3 minutes about that. Second one, when was the last time you either witnessed or experienced the hardships of the diversity in STEM? Every single person can talk about that. So it might seem scary, but it's actually, I'm asking you a super simple, just like one question. So if you're feeling scared of coming up with your own question, that tell me about the last time you experienced this, talk for 3 minutes and then switch. And then you're going to have lots of people just kind of get to learn and practice from. And the other benefit of this is that you're getting to network with other students in the province. We are just going to dive into the rest of the content. I have just a little bit more that I want to go through. I know that there's a ton of information, so definitely like come back to this and let it sink in, and then look at these tools again with a fresh mind. So we talked about this a little bit, just who to interview. At this point, because you guys are just in that problem discovery phase, honestly, just talk to as many people as possible. Talk to whoever will talk to you. Don't overthink it. As you get a little bit further down the line, you'll want to think about talking to the right people a little bit more. So thinking about who has decision-making power is really the most important person to talk to. So for example, if you are creating a solution for young students to better their online learning, while it's important that the user, the student, has a good experience, what's more important is that their teacher or their parent actually downloads the software. So you should have some conversations with the student to make sure that it's user-friendly, but you also really need to know what is going to trigger that parent or school or teacher to implement this software. So just thinking about that difference between buyer and user is something that's good to keep in mind. And also thinking about that multi-sided platform. So for that's actually the same example. For, like, let's say a platform for online learning, not only do you need the students to buy in and maybe their parents, but you also need the teacher and the school to buy in. And they're going to have different needs and different problems. So you want to make sure you're having conversations with both of those people. But for now, just talk to whoever will let you talk to them. Someone in the Starbucks line, your barista at Starbucks, your mom, your dad, your cousin, whoever will talk to you. Just pick their brain. So the final thing we're going to talk about in the last 15 minutes here is, okay, so you have all this information. What do you do with it? Where do you capture it? So one is the impact gap canvas. That's kind of the first stage. And then the next stage is actually starting to frame it in a business model. And when I say business model, it doesn't need to be a for-profit business. It doesn't even need to be a business at all. It's just a kind of a way of framing the things in this kind of a problem experienced by a customer and having a unique value. So that could be a nonprofit, it could be a social enterprise, it could be a lemonade stand. It doesn't really matter what the format is. That's really just a regulation piece. It's just about a way to kind of look at this stuff. So I'm going to go through this stuff quite quickly so we get through all of it. But the lean startup method is an approach that has really built off some of the errors that we saw in business and entrepreneurship in the past. It kind of alludes to what I've been talking about this whole time. But the old way of doing business was you came up with your big idea. You told nobody about it because everybody was out to steal it. And in those days, they probably were. If you were coming up with like Google for the very first time, that's pretty secret. You don't want to just tell everybody about it. So things are a little bit different now. Like a lot of things have been tried. Your big idea has maybe been tried before, maybe not in this exact way, but ideas are not the valuable thing. So after you come up with your big idea, you would go into stealth mode and you would build it. You would spend a couple of years, maybe get investment from your mom, you mortgage your house, you build the thing, and then you launch it into the world and nobody cares. And you've spent the best years of your career and all your money building this thing, and now you don't have any more energy, you don't have any more money to try again. So that's where the lean method has come in. So the point of this is really about running quick experiments so that you can learn your pitfalls before you even make them or before you invest a lot into making them. So this is really where this customer interviewing comes in, identifying problems comes in, because you really want to go out and validate these things first and talk to as many people as you can. Because at the end of the day, the information that you're learning from those people is worth the risk of them possibly stealing your idea. This stuff is hard. You guys know that. The amount of time that it takes to build something, the amount of dedication and passion it takes to come up with something and actually launch it into the world is no small feat. And the random person that you have a conversation with at school or in the Starbucks line, they don't have time to build this idea. They don't have the skill set or your expertise that they're actually going to be able to do this. So it's a little bit of trust that people are nice and awesome, and it's a little bit of trust that you're better than them when you go out and share your ideas. And knowing that the information you get back is going to be way more valuable than the risk you're taking. Obviously, there's secret sauce, there's some magic within all of our businesses, but you don't need to share that secret with everyone to get this information, to have that casual conversation. So the tool that you can use to capture this information that you're starting to get, one of the tools that we use most in the entrepreneurship space is called a lean canvas. So this essentially replaces a business plan. So a business plan is like a 50-page bulky document that nobody ever reads and is very hard to update if you change something or if you learn something. A lean canvas is really quick to update because it's bullet points, you can throw sticky notes on it, and it's all in one place. So this is a really cool tool to start to see how when you kind of find that micro problem, you can put it on here. This is what you think the problem is. This is who you think the customer is. This is what the value you're offering. And then as you go out into the world and you have conversations and you do research and things start to change, it's as simple as changing one of those bullet points. And for your guys' sake, a lot of these sections, you don't really have to worry about right now. What you're focused on is what is the problem, who is the customer, and what is the unique value you're offering. Stuff like the cost structure and the revenue streams and the channels is a little bit farther down the line for you all and not necessarily in the scope of this hackathon to my understanding. There might be some pieces you're interested in looking into, like if you want to, but really focusing on that problem, customer, unique value proposition is going to get you super, super far. So this tool is really awesome. I highly recommend using this, and this is iterative. So you don't fill this out just one time and leave it. You fill it out, you change it, you scrap the whole thing, you start again. So definitely use this. This is a kind of a condensed version of that called the Leaner Canvas. So it just talks about really those kind of main things that I was talking about. So what is the problem? Who is the customer? What else is being done so far? And who are the early adopters? So who are the people that are going to stand outside your store for a day waiting to get this thing? This tool is called the problem map. So it's an opportunity for you to dive. It's not super high quality, but you get the gist. It's an opportunity for you to dive a little bit deeper into what is the problem. So we tend to explain things super high level. What are the emotional impacts of this problem for people? What alternatives are they finding? How are they solving it today? Asking all those types of questions. So those are 3, 2.5. The Lean Canvas is the same, but just condensed. Tools that, once again, they'll be linked in this slide deck for you to use, that you can use to help to frame your problem discovery before you start to build. So just reflection on what we've gone over in the last hour and 20-ish minutes. We talked about how to find a problem we're solving and how to narrow that big, messy macro problem to a smaller, doable problem that you actually have some skin in the game and some realistic opportunities to do something about. We talked about customer discovery, how to pick the right people to interview, and how to avoid pitching and why going out and validating is so important. And then we talked about the lean startup method super quickly. So I'm sure you guys will dive into that in the future in some way. If you're interested in learning more, there's lots of great resources online. But the key thing to remember as you're filling out both the impact gap canvas and the lean canvas at this point is that every single thing you write down is an assumption. So every assumption that you write down, you want to go out and try and validate, and you want to try and learn how accurate it is as much as possible. You're not going to be able to de-risk everything, but figuring out what are the things that you really need to know before you start to build, and make sure that you're building something that is actually helping and actually creating impact, because that's what's going to fuel you in those long nights of coding or modeling. Into this hackathon is going to be the belief that what you're building actually has an impact. So that is all for me. I always cram a ton into these workshops, especially online. I feel like it's so easy to just cram like way more in. So if you're interested in kind of diving deeper into any of these topics, or you need a little bit of kind of a nudge to more resources, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat with you. My email is up here. It's eknight@mtroyal.ca. If you are from Mount Royal and you're interested in following along with the Institute and how you can get involved in this stuff further, our Instagram and Facebook is InnovateMRU, and you can find our website at mtroyal.ca/innovate. And there is a ton of ways to get involved. At every university, honestly, across the province, there's tons of programs in this innovation and entrepreneurship space. I obviously am biased to Mount Royal, and we have a ton of really good stuff, but there's a lot of programs going on in the province. And one of the really cool things that has happened with COVID that I'm actually kind of like the silver lining for me has been that we've been able to offer programs that typically would have just been for people in Calgary or people in Edmonton, have been able to be offered to students from across the province. So those people that are in those rural communities and at those different universities are able to tap into some of these programs. So keep your eye out for other things like this hackathon that might be kind of hopefully this pandemic is a once in a lifetime experience, but look for those little nuggets that you can tap into because of being at home, because of being virtual, that you can benefit from as a student, because there are a lot of really cool things going on.